All right, hello everyone. I'm April Dunnam. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I'm here to talk about document generation in Copilot Studio. This is actually part of our Copilot Studio Agent Academy operative curriculum that we just released. So if you want to be able to have the exact step-by-steps of what I'll be going through, I'll share a link to that at the end so that you can get to that. Now, what we're going to be doing is first, I'm going to talk about some document generation options in Copilot Studio and why for this particular scenario that we're going to be walking through, I chose the prompt method to be able to do this and the document output generation capabilities. And then I'm going to go into the demo here. So let's get started. First option, when you think about document generation, you might come to mind of Code Interpreter, which is kind of a newer capability that we have in Copilot Studio. So this is really great for those situations where you wanted to be able to do things like create and update Excel worksheets and workbooks. So what it does at its core is it gives you the ability in your agent or in your prompt to generate and execute Python to complete specific tasks. So it expands the capabilities of what you can do. So with that, we can do some kind of document generation and kind of like reading documents and processing and all of that for Word and PowerPoint files, PDFs, and it just really shines at those complex mathematical and statistical computation scenarios. So if you want to be able to do some of that and generate visualizations like charts and graphs, that's where Code Interpreter is a really good fit. Now, when it comes to using Code Interpreter, there's a few different ways that we can do this. One, we can do it at the agent level. So we can enable a setting in our Copilot Studio agent to enable Code Interpreter, and then we can execute Python anywhere in the agent conversation. So that's really useful when you want the agent to handle the analysis and file work across multiple scenarios. The other level, which we could use these Code Interpreter capabilities, is at the prompt level itself. So we can use AI prompts, which are an AI builder feature in our Copilot Studio agents. We can add them in as tools, or we can even use them in an agent flow and use them that way. And that's really useful. We can just enable that Code Interpreter feature, but it's good if you don't want to enable that for your entire agent just to let users do whatever they want with it. But if you want that really for just a very specific scenario that you want to light that power up for. Another caveat thing to know about Code Interpreter and why maybe you want to limit it to the prompt level is there is additional Copilot credits consumed when you are using that feature. So that's kind of what you can do with Code Interpreter. Another possibility of how we can handle if we want to generate a document in Copilot Studio is with AI prompts themselves, not with adding that Copilot Code Interpreter capability. So with AI prompts, those have been around for a while, and the output options we have there are text. So we can do basic, good human readable summaries, classifications, things like that for those scenarios where we don't really need structured processing. We can also have that structured JSON output. So if we want to be able to take data from a prompt and put it in a database, that's a good use case. Or there is a preview feature here to output that to a document. In this case, a Word file is what's currently supported. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you want a very structured scenario output document, like say you want to be able to fill in an invoice or a PO or something like that. So if you need that very highly formatted and structured layout, or maybe you want to just do things like support the review and collaboration features in Word to be able to edit and track changes, this is a good output option for you. So we'll be looking at that. Now, just a general comparison of the two approaches and when you might use each. So for prompts, that is going to be your go-to when you want structured and controlled outputs to Word, right? Or of course, we can do text and JSON as we just talked about as well. But from a document generation standpoint, that's where you would want to use prompts and that output there if you want it to be structured. Also, when it comes to comparing just using that Word output capability in prompts versus using Code Interpreter is the whole deterministic and non-deterministic viewpoint here. So Code Interpreter itself is going to be non-deterministic, meaning there's no way that you can guarantee that you're going to get the same output every time. And more importantly, you can't even guarantee that when you put in a prompt in your agent, or even if you're using an AI prompt and enabling code interpreter, you can't even guarantee that it's going to execute code interpreter for your ask, because it's the non-deterministic nature of using these systems. So prompts in the document generation output gives you a more deterministic approach where you can more or less guarantee that at the end of the output, you're going to get your Word template filled with the data that you need. So it's really good for if you need standardization, predictability, and that repeatable formatting, and that's your priority. And again, for code interpreter, that's really good when if you do want that computation transformation capability that it's great at and being able to do that analysis. It does support multiple formats. So if you want to do visualizations, output, to PowerPoint and all that. And if you're okay, that's the big one here, with that non-deterministic nature, and you don't need that standardization, then code interpreter is a good approach. But what we're going to focus on is really the AI prompt capability in the document generation, because for our scenario that we're going to be looking at, we need it to produce the same thing every time and fill in our template. So a few best practices when you're using this capability is the big one is to watch out for your template file size. It can't exceed 20 megabytes, and it can't be confidential or contain passwords. So that will get you into trouble if you're trying to do that. And don't try to do, so that the beauty of this approach is all of your formatting will be done in the Word template. So you don't have to prompt in all of those formatting instructions, right? So don't try to do that. Just do all of that in your Word file. And then watch your instructions if you have any ambiguous fields. So this is kind of like using AI for a fancy form fill in Word. So you need to be able to map the inputs that you want to fill. So your names need to make sense for what you're filling in the prompt. So let's just look at an example of what am I talking about, what one of these Word templates looks like. So if you want to output and use AI prompts to do this document generation, you need to start with a Word template. Now, this is a very basic one that we're looking at, but this could be, as I mentioned, an invoice that has a table with line items that you're filling in. All of this is the same concept. It just depends on the inputs that you put in. Now, the main thing that you need to know to get this to work is what you see here. You'll notice that I have these two curly brackets to open and to close, and then I have a name in between. So anywhere that you want to dynamically fill in data, you need to use this approach. So I need to dynamically fill in the job number for this role, the title, description, so on and so forth. So I put all of those names in the curly brackets there so that the prompt will know how and where to fill those values in. So once I call this and I input this, it's going to be able to do that mapping for me. And that's pretty much it. If you do have like an invoice, that's where I mentioned avoid ambiguous names. You'll have to put in your prompt, like if this is a field that just says name one, fill name one with the name of the manager or something like that. So how does this all work? So we have our template here, but how do we actually use this inside of an agent? So it's all going to start with a prompt, as I mentioned. So what we're going to do is we'll just go over to our prompt details here. And I've started putting this prompt together. So I've created this. We're just using some pretty detailed instructions. So what I'm going to be saying here is to evaluate a resume, and I'm giving it some step-by-step instructions of I want to extract the candidate details, analyze the job description, be able to get the requirements, and then generate some interview questions. So based off of what the candidate background is and what role they're applying for, generate some detailed and specific interview questions and fill out this document. We're also using a concept here of Dataverse grounding. So a lot of our data for this is stored in some Dataverse tables. So I'm going to say to take in an application number that I want to generate the interview questions for, and then cross-reference that and pull in all of the details from Dataverse. So I don't have to go do any other external lookups. This is all done in the prompt itself. I'm giving it an application number, and it's going to do some filtering. So based off of that application number, it's going to pass that into now this job application table and pull in the candidate name, email, and all of this information for me. So this alone would work as a text output, but what I've done to make sure that we can map this to our Word output is I went over here, and you'll notice we have these output settings in the upper right-hand corner. So we have text, JSON, and then this document preview. So that's the one that we're choosing to be able to let it generate this document. Now, when we do that, we'll have this document settings button light up. And then we can simply upload and point it to that interview questions Word doc that we just looked at. And as soon as we do that, because we had those fields mapped, it's going to recognize all of those fields where we had those names and the curly brackets there and map those out for me. So it's just going to be able to use my instructions and know that I want to be able to get the job requirements and like the job title and know where to map that in the Word file. So what we'll do first is we'll do a quick test here. So we'll just run this. So that's really all there is from the configuration standpoint and the prompt itself to be able to get this to work. So it's going to go and look. I already put in an application number in this input for testing. That's a valid one. And then it's going to go look up all of this relevant information inside of Dataverse where we have that stored and then generate that Word document for me. So it's always a good practice before you start trying to make this work in your agent to make sure that it works in the prompt itself. So we see all the details that it was able to find, and then this right here is a link to download that output. So we'll open this up, and I'll kind of move this over here, and then it's going to give us a Word document that we can use. Let me see. Let me just get this moved over to the right screen. There we go. So now you'll see how all of those placeholders are replaced with the actual values about that job role, which is exactly what I want. And some of the stuff, it's not just doing a fancy lookup and getting that information. I did ask it to do some summarization in the prompt for me as well. So it produced this summary of the candidate profile for me. So you can mix and match, not just pulling information from Dataverse grounding, but also being able to do some of the AI summarization capability. All right, so now we know that our prompt works. How do we get this into our agent? Well, the first thing that we're going to do, we're not going to natively call this in the agent itself. And why are we not going to do that? Because out of the box, it's not really possible to be able to just add this as a tool in the agent right here and have it output the actual file. So we need to be able to find a way to take the file contents and get the agent to return the file for us. So what we're going to call on is our friend agent flows. So in our tools here, you'll notice that we have this flow to do the, let's see, actually we're going to go back over to this tool section, sorry. And then we're going to open up our flow. Here we go. So we have a doc prep flow, and this is just going to be a way for us to execute our prompt. So we're going to pass in that application number, and we're going to say run that interview question doc prep prompt, and then pass in the application number, and then we're going to respond to the agent. Now this is the important bit because this allows us to get the actual file contents that it produces so we can pass it back to our agent. So that's all this flow is doing, executing our prompt, taking the content bytes from that, and now we're going to use this inside of our agent to be able to call this. So if we go over to agents, we'll go to our interview agent here. And instead of adding this as a tool, I'm going to actually use a topic. Now, the reason I'm using a topic is, again, all because this is the method right now that enables us to reliably get that file output. I want to be able to tell it to generate an interview doc and have it give me a downloadable file in this chat. So this is the workaround for that. We're just going to add a new topic. So I have one here for generate interview document. And then for the trigger, we're just going to give it some instructions. So when you're using topics, you need to be able to put in some instructions so it knows when it should call and go down this topic path. So if a user says to generate an interview prep doc, it knows to call this. Now we're going to call an action. So this, if you go to this plus button, you can add a tool, and that agent and that agent flow will show up here. So I can add that as a tool, pass in my application number, and then it can output that file for me. Now that I have that physical file, I can just respond with a message. And one of the things we can do in the message is say, hey, respond with a file. I can, for the content, I can point it to that interview file, and now that process is complete. So that's really just kind of the workaround to be able to pass in and get a file returned. So how does this all work in practice? So let's see, I'm going to ask it to create an interview prep file for a job application, and that's just from our Dataverse table in this case, so that's a valid job app. And we'll see what it's going to do here. All right, so it's going through some of the tools, and it's generating a plan, and now you see that it called our topic. So there's our generate interview doc topic. So it knows based off of the text that I put in that it should go down that path to call the topic, and should return and call that flow and return the interview doc for us. Gotta love live demos. Let's hope it. Never know how long it's going to take here. There we go. So here's your interview prep file, and I even put in some naming convention in there. So I wanted to take the job role number, interview prep. So let's download this, and let's see if that actually worked. So there's our new interview prep file, and it looks like it did. So we have our job role number, Power Platform Architect, and there's all the information filled out. So that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to be able to call that prompt, have it be able to output to Word, and then pass that into the conversation. So that's really, if you want that predictable output every time, no matter what job application I'm pointing it to, I'm going to have that same format outputted with the appropriate details in it. As I mentioned, you can use Code Interpreter as well. So if we look over here in our settings, one of the options we can enable at the agent level itself is Code Interpreter. So we can do kind of more ad hoc things, but if I wanted to do this same scenario here, I just couldn't guarantee that I would get that exact format every time. So that's why we didn't go the Code Interpreter route in this case. So with that, as I mentioned, this is all available in our Agent Academy operative path. So if you want these exact steps so you can go replicate this in your environment and see how it actually works, you can go to aka.ms/agent-academy/operative. And this is a whole path. So you'll go through a bunch of different exercises to get this whole hiring process agent set up. And then you'll be able to go through this particular lab. So I'll answer any questions you have in the chat, but thank you very much.